In this video, we are gonna talk about Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga, a prequel to the movie Mad Max Fury Road. We will discuss the movie story, plot, its cast and characters. We will also discuss the movie production details. So let's begin with the movie reviews. The question is, do you have what it takes to make it epic? Says an undaunted Chris Hemsworth. It's a call to action that comes toward the end of Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga. George Miller's apocalyptic epic western prequel to Mad Max Fury Road that could of course be directed at Miller himself, because this film is here to give you more gravity defying chases, more high flying stunts, more deeply filled pathos, and somehow and even greater spirit to push the limits of what the frame can hold, employing Christian iconography and Arthurian legend to craft an entrancing story that will manage to surprise, even if we already know of the bleak future it's guiding us toward. It's simply one of the best prequel ever made. Broken into 5 chapters, each denser with the last, the film begins with a very young Furiosa, played by Alila Brownie, picking fruits from a tree near her bucolic homeland, the Green Place. A biker gang arrives for forage the land, and Tha Furiosa ably attempts to sabotage their bikes. She is captured, causing her mother, Charlie Fraser, to venture out into the desert wasteland to retrieve her. A crazy chase ensues, one of the film's many expensive set pieces that sees Furiosa's mother pursuing her daughter's kidnappers over sand dunes and through a sandstorm to the steps of a hideout belonging to the messianic figure Dementis, that is played by Chris Hemsworth. This is the beginning of a decade-long feud between Furiosa and Dementis that involves revenge, grief, and the desire to return home. To do any further summarizing would, of course, not only spoil the film but would also say that the narrative beats are necessary. They are not. That doesn't mean Furiosa is illogical. Rather than more than anything, Miller is telling an emotional story of how a once vicious child became a hardened swimmer. That kind of arc matches well with the film's operatic sensibilities as we are introduced to the origins of wasteland fortress like Gas Town and Bullet Farm and taken to the citadel helmed by a younger, more imposing Immortan Joe. Other characters like Immortan Joe's bubbling sons Rictus and Secrotus return, and tips of the head are given to fan favorite from Fury Road. Surprisingly, the older Furiosa, a striking Anya Taylor-Joy, doesn't appear until an hour or so in the film. That might inspire immediate disappointment in some, but it should not, because Elela Brownie as the adolescent Furiosa is so absorbing. After recalling a young Jodie Foster in her mixture of otherworldly intelligence and relentless confidence, the grand work she lays is so seamless that by the time we leap forward to Taylor's Joy take on the character, it required a few beats before I could tell the difference between the two actresses. Miller is so assured at reading an audience, he even crafts an allocated chase that sees Furiosa driving across the wasteland with Praetorian Jake, played by Tom Porky, on an oil run that gives Taylor-Joy and the character the perfect entrance. A hard push in for a worthy close-up. Tharburg is on screen for a relatively short time. He and Taylor-Joy build quick chemistry as two lost souls who believes that parasites still exist somewhere in the world. If they follow the map of star tattooed on Firosa's forearm, if it feels like Hemsworth is an also Rain, he is not, which is odd to say because he is saddled with a tribal wig and an abrasive prosthetic nose, and even disappeared for long scratches. Still, whenever he does show up, he might be the best part of Furiosa. He doesn't just get the best, more instantly quotable lines. He has never been more physically commanding, first as a poised messiah and swindler, then as a blowhard politician, then as an emperor with no clothes on. The combination of Dementis wit, closeness, and cold calculation is a persona Hemsworth has worked on for some time, and it all comes together here for an unforgettable villain turn. I can certainly nitpick about what elements I prefer in Fury Road as opposed to Furiosa. There's a far more VFX in the latter, causing me to miss some of the thrills Miller inspired with his unflinching use of practical effect. I also think that Fury Road acts on a subtler thematic level, which is saying something because the visual language in that film, far and immaculate as the craftsmanship is, basically bashes you over the head. Firosa goes one step further. Every line of dialogue flags the metaphorical importance of every scene, and yet it's easy to ignore these tiny grievances not only because you are left marveling at the big swing Miller is taking, but also because his interest in this world, these characters, and this type of big, bold storytelling is so infectious. There's also a character named Pissboy, so this really is a movie with something for everyone. No one knows how to do scale better than Miller, Margaret Sixel, and Elliot Knappman's editing is breathtakingly seamless, quickly building both rapport between characters and Ganley depth with equal intensity, to the point that D.P. Simmons Dugan's eloquent photography of these desolate death valleys, matched by composer Tom Holkenborg, definingly propulsive score, wholly immerse you in way that is not needlessly showing. Each large set piece feels necessary, aware of space and story, and bringing with a camera that takes delight in knowing exactly what kill shot or angle of the many battle we want to take in as it swoops between longing bodies, massive infernos, monster trucks, big rigs, and over sand dunes. Much will be written about Furiosa on a thematic level, such as how it subverts the biblical apple scene for a well-earned ending, or how it speaks of our present environmental, militaristic, and regressive politician reality, particularly why we go to war and the focalness of the leader who take us there. But this is also just a big, entertaining popcorn movie told with a sense of adventure and play. Miller is not here for tawdry melodrama, algorithm plotting, or art design for the small screen. Furiosa aims to blow you away, and it does to Valhalla and beyond. Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga. Fury Road is nearly impossible to follow, but Furiosa is a solid, entertaining, and well-made addition to the Mad Max universe. In 2015, I saw Mad Max Fury Road 3 separate times in the theater. My mind was delightfully blown with the incredible world building in it, and I was utterly gobsmacked by Charlize Theron's performance as Furiosa. It was probably even the last physical DVD I ever purchased, So, intent was I was always having it available to watch. The movie would go on to be nominated for Best Picture at the 2016 Academy Awards, which is a wild honor for a summer blockbuster action film. Needless to say, my hopes were very high for Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga, the prequel we have all been waiting for. And before I launch into a million thoughts, this was a very good movie. It perhaps the second best Mad Max movie after Fury Road. It's also very easy to see how it was passaged in the Road Warrior 2 from its shade graphications imaginary to its charismatic muscular leader and the early war Rick. But it's nearly impossible to watch Furiosa without constantly comparing it to the absolute perfection that is Fury Road. And I think that's okay with this new entry. George Miller gives us 2.5 more hours to spend with some of the most interesting characters in the wasteland while introducing us to several new ones. But at the end of the film, I did not feel like I know much more about everyone's motivations or relationships. Maybe this is because Fury Road did its world building just right. You hear about the green place and understands its mythology but never see it. Characters talks about half-lives and being awaited in Valhalla, and that's all you need to know. In Furiosa, we take tips to the actual green place and the bullet farm and gas down that there is no more real world building that just a quick physical tour of the surroundings. This will be a running theme throughout the movie, and it left me with either a simple appreciation, oh cool, that's what Gastown looks like, or just more questions. The green place, what few seconds we get to spend in it, resembles Thamisa from Wonder Woman, as it is also a place where women are warriors and men seems to be scarce. I would have loved to spend a few more minutes in this oasis, and narratively, I think it would have served the story more to show exactly how much was lost when it disappeared. As I like to say about the Star Wars universe, I appreciate any glimpse into a world that I love, and Furiosa is no exception. Settling back into the wasteland was enjoyable and fun, and it harkens back more to some of the older Mad Max movies with its strange characters and ridiculous interactions. A character named Secrotus is one of Immortan Joy's sons and blusters with the best of them. The wasteland is alive and well in Furiosa, from the lost war boys wondering if he has made it Valhalla family to the motorbikes bedecked with tall forms and helmets adorned with human skulls. Also, the entire movie I experienced what I call Chuck's arm. We know Furiosa loses her apprentice, but we don't know exactly when or how. Never in a million years would I have crossed that it would have contained a tattoo to her lost green place on it, and that to survive in the wasteland she'd have to cut it off herself a la 127 hours. That's some good writing there. The opening sequence where Mary Jibasa, Feroza's mom, chases her kidnappers across the dunes is an blood-pumping way to kickstart our story in the first minutes, with high-octane motorcycles, sniping, and brute force physical violence. Watching her interact with the wasteland gets you thinking, hell yeah, of course, this is Furiosa's badass mother. The Pavlini, the group of elderly female warriors, was one of my favorite parts of Fury Road, and I would have killed to have learned even more about their training and ethos. From the short burst we see they are incredible warriors with a keen sense for justice. Hannah Arendt wrote about the banality of evil. George Miller in Furiosa showcases the absurdity or even hilarity of evil. Homogeneous had his Jason mask, Dementus has his prosthetic nose and ridiculous wig. Chris Hemsworth portrays the primary antagonist in the film, and he is responsible for the gruesome death of Furiosa's mother, which he forces her to watch. She spends her life waiting for revenge on him and ultimately gets it. But before the climax, we spend a lot of time with him, most of it enjoyable. Dementus is a wild ride that alternates between moments of sheer comic perfection, his Roman chariot of motorcycles, and ambivalent cruelty. He does bad things, you often witness them. But he doesn't reek of unbridled evil. He wants power but is strangely pragmatic about it. He is also bad at leading, which is actually what would happen in a dystopia with strong cults of personality. Miller returned to his Fury Road bread and butter with an incredible warwick chase scene in the middle of the movie, and he somehow manages to come up with new ideas and exceed what he did last time. We get a thrilling radar scene where the good guys fend off attackers with motorized parachutes, and I could collectively hear jaws drop in my screening as the cautious taunts and crisscrossed over the truck with breathtaking precision. The metal spinning mummy knockers on the back, once they are activated, deliver a very satisfying new way to destroy motorcycle too. I cannot wait to watch this scene multiple times. My chief complaint honestly is with the casting of Anya Taylor-Joy, and to be fair to her, my love for the character of Furiosa apparently has built up a mythology that may well be impossible to live up to. And I apologize for the following sarcasms that may well be nitpicking. For her to work in this role, you have to completely buy her as Furiosa, and I just did not. Charlize Theron's performance was brutal, emotional, and physical in a way that ATG did not pull off. To me, she was too dew-like, too delicate, all cheekbones and skinny arms. Compare this to the harness, muscular, and 8% body fat of Hemsworth. I found myself wondering where he found creatine and whey protein powder in the apocalypse, much like I did with Homgians in The Road Warrior. But after seeing Katy O'Brien in Love Lies Bleeding this year, I was hoping that a younger Furiosa would be more clearly a dominant fighter with a strong and aggressive physical presence. Also, when she finally shaves her head in the final minute of the movie, La G.I. June, you can tell AGT is wearing a wig. She has stated that this was because of the disjointed filming schedule. Granted, not everyone can shave their head for a role Theron did. You can absolutely notice the difference. None of this is to say that ADG's performance is bad. It was just missing something for me. It's not her fault that Miller didn't write a ton of dialogue for her, huge swatches for time pass with her speaking only a sentence or two. But it just felt like she was a stand in. There's no denying that Immortan Joy is not a good dude. He keeps women enslaved and harshly deprives citizens of vital nature resources. But in Furiosa, he comes across as a voice of reason in the wasteland, especially when compared to lunatic Dementis. However, we don't learn hardly anything new about Joe the whole movie. I found this interesting because at the very end of Furiosa, as Furiosa kills him, the last thing she shoots is "Remember me." I assume she is referring to her time spent as an enslaved child captive in his harem, but it's a little unclear. She spends time as a praetor first and as an imperator for Joy, and he never seems to realize who she really was. I suppose I expected some more tension or more insight into their relationship. Also, huge Kenneth Barn unfortunately passed away in 2020, so there's a new joy in this one. And though he looks nearly identical, his stentorian voice is definitely missing. Overall, this is a very good Mad Max movie and it builds upon all of its predecessors in interesting and impressive ways. But following Fury Road is a nearly impossible feat to best in any sense. George Miller is one hell of a storyteller, and I will gladly enjoy any new addition to this decaying world. It's a perfect in every way. So, how much time escapes between when Furiosa returns after killing Dementis and when she smuggles to Bride out? The movie makes it look like a few days. Furiosa, Mad Max Saga, Sand and Fire, a review of the movie. I don't like sand. It's a coarse and rough and irritating and it gets everywhere. But it's almost the entire backdrop of Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga amongst a few beautiful set pieces. It's a landscape you see in a lot of films, just as you see a lot of revenge films, which Furiosa also is. But George Miller's flamboyant vision of a unique world is anything but conventional. Even with all of the sand, Furiosa is filled with colorful characters, bursts of imaginative design, and some of the most hated action sequence since Fury Road. Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga, is the origin story of the titular character Furiosa and how she became the first woman we meet in Mad Max Fury Road. I will not get into details about the story itself because the trailers were cut to prevent spoiling most of the film's plot, which I strive to do in my reviews as well. If you have not seen the other Mad Max films, you can still see Furiosa without having to watch the others. It can function as a perfect standalone film while still including pieces from the other installments of the franchise. Mad Max Fury Road was not a very dialogue heavy film, and Furiosa flows in that some vein. Anya Taylor Joy plays the younger Furiosa, who was played by Charlize Theron in Fury Road, with around only 30 lines of dialogue. Taylor Joy brings an emotionally broad performance of someone who fighting for their survival while trying to maintain who they are. Taylor Joy emotive and striking facial feature bring Feroza's emotional out in an almost animalistic way. She was a certain snarl to the way she interacted with other people after her childhood was ripped away from her. You can see it in the curl of her lip when she interacts with the world around her, while the interior nonsense of her performance still tread over my mind. Her physical performance is nothing to discount either. With such limited dialogue as an actor, she sells so much more of who Firoza is as she grows with how she moves, walks, and uses weapons with more confidence as she progresses through her journey. While Anaya Taylor-Joy plays Firoza for around half of the film, Alala Brownie plays her for the earlier half of the story in her youth. She gives a fantastic performance alongside Chris Hemsworth as Dr. Dementis. Without getting too deep into spoilers, she is treated almost like an animal for a good portion. And we see the struggle she goes through after the horror she has been put through. It's a great performance from a young actor. After seeing the film Spiderhead, I portrayed to the film squad that every director would cast Chris Hemsworth in villain roles because he is incredible in them. As a physical spiceman, he is already longer than film is stature and form, but he can give such an animated and bombastic performance that makes him an incredible villain. And when I tell you that he brings you to the thunderstorm with his role as Dr. Dementis, I truly mean that. His costuming by Jenny Bevan has such a unique flair that he runs with. He prances around in a cap and a leather chest piece for a large portion of the film. There is a classic villain flair to him that makes you believe he very well could be the type to tie you to the train tracks. But then he flips the switch. Hemsworth brings a performance of a much darker nature, and I was not ready for knowing his previous work. Underneath the characters Moshimo and Cheese, there is a very sinister, horrible man that is portrayed wonderfully. There are scenes where you see the fun veneer wash away to reveal the real monster behind the color shock's exterior. The scene climatic final confrontation had me reminiscing about Rutger Hall's speech in Blade Runner. I was truly in awe of the performance and I hope we see more like this from Hemsworth. The primary colors of Furiosa are orange and yellow because of the apocalypse theming and the sand. With some films that could make it a bore to watch, but the George Miller's version of this world is just a tapestry to paint an incredibly vibrant painting on, where some post-apocalyptic worlds go for a mold cold, realistic design approach. Miller and his team go to the opposite direction. Everything in the world of Mad Max is weird, and Furiosa is no exception. For intense, we all know how important vehicles are to the series. They are cultural and religious staple in the world. So just giving your villain of the story a car or a motorcycle at this point would feel like toning it down. What this film does instead is give Dr. Dementus a chariot driven by a motorcycle that is only one of many incredible vehicles that show up in this movie. Some of which fly, they are all distinctly painted and designed to fit the world and groups around them. Everything is incredibly unique, but not only that, everything feels customized. Every character's vehicle feels like it is an extension of their self. That is an incredibly hard thing to do when there are so many things and people on screen at once. While there are so many vehicles driving around on screen at once, they are also typically in combat with one another, which leads to some incredible stunts work. The film is not as action heavy as its predecessor, which I think gives those scenes more room to breathe instead of it being back to back from start to finish. There was never a time in the film or during any of the sequences where the thought I have seen that before passed through my mind. Every different thing just fit brand new or a remix of ideas to form something fresh. But with all of that combat, there is a ton of explosions and something that I think is very important in the film Fire. With the world being so muted in colors when fire is on screen, it really stands out. Our group called the War Boys, who are always painted white, use fire in almost everything they do, from their explosive spears or flamethrowers. It's a constant in the film that really just stand out to me because thematically we are watching Furiosa being forked into the warrior that we met her as. There's a brilliant scene where Anya Taylor-Joy's back is pressed to a gate as flames nearly fully engulf her as she tries to stage a rescue, which she has failed to do in the past. Everything about the shot, from the costume design to Anaya face looking into the camera and everything around it, felt like the perfect encapsulation of the film for me. It's a world on fire, but we are seeing these small glimpses of the humanity that fights against the flames to exit. Despite everything thrown at her, Firosa follows through on her promises until the very end. Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga directed by George Miller. Furiosa is set 15 to 20 years before the events of Mad Max Fury Road and follows a younger Furiosa who is snatched from the green place of many mothers. and into the hands of a biker horde led by the warlord Dementus. While two titans war of dominance over the citadel, Furiosa survives many trials as she plots a way back home through the wasteland. In 2015, George Miller revived Mad Max with Fury Road, delivering not only the best installment of the series but also one of the best action films of all time. One that made a huge impact on pop culture with the grand success of Fury Road. Many people were eager to see another installment on the big screen, and George Miller was eager to make another one. But he wanted to take a lot of time in making it. 9 years later, we officially have the newest installment of the Mad Max series in the form of a prequel that does not focus on Max himself but instead focus on the origins of Furiosa, who was a major favorite for many in Fury Road. Despite the absence of Max and the 9 years long wait, it was very much worth it because Furiosa is one hell of an incredible film and a worthy installment of the Mad Max series delivered by George Miller. It is an epic odyssey that mostly lives up to the hype, offering phenomenal career-defining performance, a very well-written, sprawling story that offers a grand appreciation of the Mad Max Matthews, and amazingly crafted, underlining field action that goes to insane levels. Now, does this film reach the same level of perfection as its predecessor Fury Road? No, but it nearly does, and I feel it serves as a fantastic and praiseworthy prequel for Fury Road despite some of its faults. Let's dive into the grand, the good, and the slightly meta core of this Mad Max saga, starting with the cast. One thing you can never deny George Miller being good at picking great cast members of all of his films, and Frosa is no exception, as we get some truly talented actors and actresses that give it their all, making this hellish world feel alive in every way. But of course, the true stars of this film that make it as compelling as it is are none other than Anya Taylor-Joy as the titular Frosa and Chris Hemsworth as a villainous Dementis. If there was one person who was going to match the emotional power and intensity Charlize Theron brought as Furiosa, it was Anya Taylor-Joy. I knew from the day her casting was announced that Anaya was going to be absolutely phenomenal in this role, and she did not disappoint at all. She may be playing a younger version of Firosa, but she emotes and embraces the same amount of rage and endless determination as Theron's version of the character, making her feel like the exact same person we know and loved in Fury Road. You get to see her origins fully explored in this film and get a deeper understanding of what she has been through, leading her to the events in Fury Road in a tragic tale of loss, survival, and vengeance, all of which is mostly told visually through Anaya's performance. She has about 30 lines of dialogue in the entire film and yet was still able to display a full range of emotions without any need for consistent dialogue, in a similar manner to Tom Hardy's performance in Fury Road. She definitely lived up to my expectations, but I did not accept was for her to be revolted and almost overshadowed by her opposition in this film, which is Chris Hemsworth as the warlord Dementus. Holy shit, did Chris Hemsworth blow me away, delivering quite possibly the best performance in his entire career. This is not the first film that Chris Hemsworth has played a villain, but this is definitely the best villain he has played, giving us a truly sadistic and psychotic warlord that detires with unsettling charisma and energy, stealing the spotlight every time he is on screen. Immortan Joy might be a villain you love to hate, but even he is not as unhinged and dangerous as Dementus. Hemsworth truly transforms himself when it came to playing his role and exceeds any expectations of him in the best ways possible, making for a career defining performance that further showcases his incredible range. Another notable performance in this film that I found to be very underrated yet still impactful was Tom Burke as a Praetorian Jack, a principal commander of the Citadel's military forces who meets and mentors Furiosa in the ways of the wasteland. I have considered Tom Burke to be a really underrated actor after seeing him in certain Netflix films like Mank and The Wonder, so it was great to see him on the big screen and being part of this epic story as a pretty badass character that shares some truly great and unexpected chemistry with Anya's Furiosa. He is the one who teaches Furiosa how to survive, thus he ends up meaning a lot more to her as the film progresses, making for a duo I did not expect to love so much. Another underrated performance I have to delight is that of Alela Brownie as young Furiosa in the first two chapters of the film. I was not expecting to get as much time with the version of Furiosa, but I am honestly glad we did, not only for how it adds layer to her character, but also for the incredible visual performance we get from Alela Brownie, who showcases an amazing range of emotions. The film's narrative is told as a sprawling first chapter odyssey that follows the epic journey of Furiosa and takes many subversive turns while also expanding upon the Mad Max mythos. Similar to Fury Road, it is mostly told through compelling and very well executed visual storytelling without a heavy reliance on dialogue or exposition. But unlike Fury Road, this film goes at a more slow-burn pace, and while they may end up bothering some people, I was completely fine with it. Much like I did with Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, I will defend the pacing of this film because I feel it was necessary to take the time to explore the characters and the world of the wasteland and get us more attached them, while simultaneously adding more context to Fury Road and improving that film in the process. There are certainly numerous moments of non-stop adrenaline fueled action sequences that occur back to back in parts of the film, like in Fury Road, but it's not as constant. And I honestly like this new approach George Miller went for because it prevents from being a rehash of the previous films. Plus, the slower moments in between each major action sequence builds up to the next one with very well crafted tension, making all the action and the most intense scenes feel very satisfying and more emotionally compelling thanks to the narrative build up. However, there is one particular event that this film was seemingly building up to take had a very disappointing payoff. It felt like a massive missed opportunity to have one of the coolest cinematic battle sequences that could have been on par with or even surpasses the phenomenal third act of Fury Road. I cannot go into details about what the scene is, but it is basically is a big battle that was being built up over the course of the film, but rather than seeing it in all its glory, we only get brief glimpses of it before suddenly skipping to the aftermath. It felt like a total cop out, and I really don't understand why they did not commit to the epic battle they were setting up. Was it for budget reason, passing reasons, studio influence? I am not sure at the moment, but I definitely feel like we were denied from seeing something truly amazing. That being said, this unfortunate cup out from an epic battle is made up for by a phenomenal final chapter and conclusion that serves as the ultimate payoff for Firoza's journey, which to me was the most important part of the film that the filmmakers needed to do right, and thankfully they did it right. When it comes to the technical elements of the film, A majority of it is awesome and is nearly on par with all the technical elements of Fury Road, but there were some issues I feel dragged it down from being completely on par with Fury Road. The practical effect in this film for the action sets, makeup, stunts, and vehicles are all perfect and phenomenal as one would expect. But I could not help but notice there was a higher usage of CGI effects in this film over practical compared to Fury Road. I can understand this was maybe a choice that was made in an attempt to keep a majority of the cast and crew safe during filming after how dangerous the process of making Fury Road was. But if that was the case, then I feel that the George Miller and his team should at least be able to make some convincing CGI effects in the amount of time they had making this film right. Well, while a majority of the CGI effects looked great in the film, there was a substantial amount of CGI effects that looked extremely unpolished and were visually distracting. In one of the initial trailers and TV spots for the film, several people, including myself, pointed out how there were some action sequences that looked visually unappealing due to unpolished effect, but we collectively agreed to wait for the finished product since most of the time the effect look better in the final product than in the marketing. Unfortunately, that was not entirely the case here, as a lot of those some scenes criticized in the trailer looked exactly the same in the final product but were now more visually distracting being on the big screen. They had a lot of time to go in and polish these particular effects, so there is no real excuse for them to turn out the way they did. On top of that, I feel the high usage of CGI takes away some of the tension and anxiety the action scenes should be providing. The practical danger and realism that Fury Road had, I feel personally, helped the film visually as well as narratively, giving it more impact on the big screen than this film does with its heavier reliance on CGI. Again, I feel a majority of the CGI looks great in the film, but it feels like such a step down in quality compared to the gently yet masterful look and feel of Fury Road. One thing I can say is still masterful in this film is the stellar cinematography that enhanced the epic scale of the film and some of the best effects featured throughout. For the number of bad effect presents, there are far more beautiful frames oozing with vibrant colors and energy that more than make up for it. I can also say the editing and sound designs are really excellent and add to the tension-filled atmosphere of the action. And of course, we has composer Tom Hulkenborg back once again delivering a hardcore and epic score to get the heart pumping and raise the underline of this film to the highest levels possible. Despite some of its missteps, the film is still another grand epic and an extremely worthy prequel for Fury Road that was definitely worth the long wait and should be seen on the biggest screen possible. I am going to give Furiosa a A equal to 97. Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga, a lovely Avenger. Dystopia has really looked as grim and felt as exhilarating as it has in George Miller Mad Max cycle. For decades, Miller has been moving viewers with a Hellenistry image of a ravaged, violent world that looks enough like ours to generate showers of recognition. Yet, however familiar his alternative universe can seem, feel his filmmaking creates such a strong contact high that it's always been easy to simply bliss out on the sheer spectacle of it all apocalypse goal. The thing is, it has started to feel like school, but because in the years since the origin Mad Max opened in 1979, the distance between Miller's Scorched Earth and ours has narrowed. Set a few years from now, the film tracks rock intensity. Mel Gibson, a highway patrol cop who has a semblance of a normal life with a wife and kid, that things are about to go to hell for Max is obvious in the opening shot of a sign for the Hell of Justice, an entry that evokes the gate at Auschwitz. You may have flicked if you made that association, but whatever gaps you had were soon swept away by the ensuing chases and crashes, the gunning engines, and made laughter. Miller's latest and fifth movie in the cycle, Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga, is primarily an origin story that recounts the life and brutal, dominating times of the young Furiosa, the hard-biting rig driver played by Charlize Theron in the last film, Mad Max Fury Road. Miller's magnum opus Fury Road is at once the apotheosis of his cinematic genius. It's one of the great movies of the last decade and a departure narratively and tiny from the previous films. In Fury, Maxwell serves as the nominal headliner with Tom Hardy taking over for Gibson, but the movie's dramatic and emotional weight rests on Furiosa, her quest, and her hopes. As befits a creation story, Furiosa tracks Furiosa from childhood to young adulthood, a downward spiral that takes her from freedom to captivity and in time circumscribed sovereignty. It opens with the 10 years old Furiosa foraging in a forest close to a paradisial outpost called the Green Place of Many Mothers. Just as she is reaching for an amusingly metaphorical ripe peach, her idol is shortcut by a gang of snaggluthe hygiene challenge bikers. They are soon rocketing across the desert with Furiosa tied up on one of their bikes with her mother and another woman in pursuit on horseback, a chase that passes the fight for power and buddies with fellows. The chase grows exponentially tenser as Miller begins shifting between close-up and expansive long shot, the raucous noise and energy of the kidnappers on their hell machine working counterpunally against the desert stillness. While the scene's arid landscapes conjured up past Mad Max adventures, the Betis and the Glooping Horse awoke the classic western from which the series has drawn some of its metaphoric force. Max has often seems like a Hollywood Gensler transplanted into Miller's feverish imagination with some notes from Joseph Campbell. The minute Frost starts gathering on her Campbell feline, Miller makes it clear that this wee captive is no damsel in distress. Furiosa's odyssey takes a turn for the more ominous when she is delivered to the biker's ruler, Warlord Dementus, a vamping Chris Hemsworth, a valuable showboater who oversees a gaggle of largely male nomads. Wearing a blowing white cap, Dementus travels in a chariot drawn by motorcycles and keeps a scholar by his side. He is a ridiculous figure, and Miller and Hemsworth lean into the character's absurdity with a physical presentation that is an outlandish as Dementor's pomposity and nose. It's hard not to wonder if Miller drew inspiration for the character from both Charlton Heston's heroic campaign and the Arab Sheikh in the 1959 epic Ben-Hur, a very different desert saga. The power of the Mad Max movies partly derives from how Miller supercharged the kinds of stories that are passed from family to family, tribe to tribe, culture to culture, the ones that are embedded in our heads and charts our path. Whether we know it or not, yet while Miller is a modern mathmaker, he remains tethered to the world. The machinations and conflagration in the movies at times casually Miller our own. And it's worth noting that he is also a physician. He was the set doctor on some Max movies. His background help explain, I think, his attention to the human body, most obviously in the Flame Beyond Stun work that has become a series trademark. And His delight in showing the variant parts of bodies, machines, and ecosystems how they work. Firoza's own body is very much at the center of this movie, which outfits direction when, after some power plays and narrative busy work, she lands in the Citadel, the heavily guarded fortress the character failed in Fury Road. There she is hoarded with some clustered young women, harmonization whose sole function is to bear children for immortal joy. The Citadel's leader, it's also here that Froza, still a child, catches the eye of one of Immortal Joy's spawn, a hawking predator whose design on her jolt the story into a different unsettling register. Miller smartly doesn't overplay this section and Froza evades this creep, but it's still a shock to the system. The shock lingeringly and darkens the story precipitously. To survive, Froza escapes her would-be monster by obscuring her identity and joining the ranks of the Citadel's Chatter's work. She melted into the crowd and years pass as the scene blend together and a determined, sympathetic Taylor Joy steps into the role. There's a more lots and lots Firosa shaves her head and find a mentor in a driver, Patriotorian Jack. Together, they and armies of minions journey to hot spot like show, Bullet Farm, where Miller dazzles you with his customary paradoxics as he fits the piece immortal joy and tremendous included into place. It takes a while to get used to Taylor Joy as Firosa, partly because Theron originated the character with such a distinct mixture of raw anger and deep bond melancholy. Theron also looked like she could kick everyone's butt in Fury Road. She more or less kicked Max, at least metaphorically, by becoming the series' new totem. Taylor Joy doesn't have her predecessor's physical expressiveness, but like Theron, she trained as a ballet dancer and moves beautifully with the kind of enforces gracefulness that suggests she can easily flip out of any difficulty. Taylor Joy's Furiosa may look too physically slight to handle the Armageddon, but the sense of vulnerability, of course, serves the story. My guess is that Miller chose Taylor-Joy as his new Furiosa in part because of the actress's large, wide-set eyes. They are enormous, they are also memorizing, they lock your own gaze down, commanding your attention, never more so than when the actress is looking up with her headboard. It's an angle that accentuates the whites of her eyes. Wine shine especially bright in the Citadel's sculpture lightning. Jack Nicholson perfected his menacing technique in The Shining, which is why it's called the cookbrick stare. The effect can be greatly destabilizing, creating uncertainty about the character and what kind of hero she'll prove to be. Furiosa's reticence is tragic as well as a trait she shares with Mad Max himself, the model for her resident Avenger. While Furiosa is hiding in plain sight in the Citadel, her circumcision protects her, but it also asymptotes her existential plight. She is alone, spiritually and in every other respect, at least before meeting Petrotorian Jack. Not that they are chatty, hers is a lonely bargain, and as the story and the fighting continue, it gives Furosa surprising emotionally heaviness, which can make this exciting and kinetic scene for scene. Firosa is very much a compliment to Fury Road, yet the new movie never fully pops the way the earlier one does. As it turns out, it is one thing to watch the movie about warriors hightailing it out of Dodge on the road to nowhere. It's something else entirely to watch a woman struggle to survive a war that eats its young and everyone else too. Miller is much a quietly intentive filmmaker that it's been easy to forget that he keeps making movies about the end of life as we know it. It's a blast watching His characters fight over oil, water, and women, yet, while I have long thought of him as a great filmmaker, it's only with Furiosa that I now understand he is also on kick ass Prophet of Doom. Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga movie box office explain what the hell happened with the Mad Max prequel. Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga had an underwhelming opening and box office run, something that is varyingly symptomatic of wider Hollywood box office problems. Furiosa is connected to 2015 Mad Max Fury Road as a prequel set further behind the latter in the Mad Max movie timeline. The film was undoubtedly one of the most anticipated of the years, especially in film loving circles, primarily due to the immensely positive reception of Fury Road and the fantastic cast assembled for Furiosa. Despite the anticipation for the film, Furiosa's path to Valhalla has been somewhat tarnished by the time of Furiosa's climactic ending. The film leads right into Mad Max Fury Road and tells a fantastic, wacky, layered, complex story filled with action set piece worthy of its predecessor or successor chronologically. That said, Furiosa has proven not to resonate with general audience, begging the question of what went wrong with the Mad Max Fury Road prequel. How much Furiosa made in its opening weekend? Furiosa's opening weekend number was surprisingly low, as reported by the Hollywood Reporter. Furiosa slumped to a 26 million gross between Friday, May 24 and Sunday, May 26. However, Furiosa was released over the Memorial Day weekend, taking its estimated domestic total to between 31 to 33 million. Concerning how Furiosa fired overseas, the reading is not much better. In territories outside of the United States and Canada, Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga earned around $30 million, taking its worldwide total opening weekend haul to a lowly 61 to 63 million dollar. Furiosa's total box office, how much the Mad Max prequel has made. Per deadline, Furiosa made $11.5 million domestically on its second weekend, coming behind the Garfield movie at $13 million. Furiosa box office has seen a 56% drop from the first weekend, which would not be disastrous on its own, but is a bad news for the movie considering its disappointing opening weekend. As a comparison, the Garfield movie had a 45% drop from its three-day opening weekend by the end of its box office run. Furiosa grossed 67.5% domestically. In terms of international numbers, Furiosa grossed $105.3 million, bringing the total to $172.77 million. Its biggest competitor, the Garfield movie, grossed $135 million, bringing the total to $227 million. Although neither Garfield nor Furiosa has done particularly great in their second weekend, the latter has a much bigger budget. Furiosa reportedly has a production budget of $168 million. Why Furiosa's box office is surprisingly low despite good reviews. Although Furiosa is receiving positive reviews, its box office return for its opening weekend were underwhelming. Many could point to the film itself and wonder why Furiosa specifically is not resonating with audience. Through the issue is much broader than any one film. Instead, Hollywood as a whole has been suffering with box office success in recent years, with a variety of reasons factoring into this disappointing stretch of failed movies. Unfortunately, is simply the latest in a long time of underperforming movies that, if its great reception is anything to go by, should be earning much more. Furiosa critical reception. Critic Rotten Tomato scores are 90%. Audience Rotten Tomato score or 90%, cinema score B+. The first problem facing Furiosa has affected other 2024 release like The Fall Guy since the COVID-19 pandemic. The first problem facing Furiosa has affected other 2024 releases like The Fall Guy since the COVID-19 pandemic. The wait time between a movie ending its theatrical run and being released on digital is increasingly shortening. The Fall Guy's poor box office was chopped off with the announcement it would release on digital 2 weeks after releasing in theaters. This shrinking wait time is causing audience to stop spending money in theater in favor of cheaper home video option which evidently impacted Furiosa 2. Aside from wider industry problem, Furiosa's status as a prequel is likely a factor contributing to its poor box office. In recent years, prequel to giant movies simply do not have the pull as they once might have. Some intents include Solo, a Star Wars story, and The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, both of which grossed significantly less than their other franchise installments. Furiosa followed suit with a prequel to Mad Max Fury Road, obviously not high on the list of stories general audience desired. One other element that could have worsened Furiosa's opening weekend was its competition, although the only other film that was released over the 3-day Memorial Day weekend was the Garfield movie. This film appeals much more to families. Any family who desired a holiday weekend theater trip will have chosen Garfield instead of Furiosa given the latter's R rating and the former's childlike nature. This was proven by Garfield's almost identical domestic opening weekend of $31 million across the 4 days. How Furiosa box office compares to other Mad Max movies. Another way of determining how Furiosa performed is by comparing it to other Mad Max installments. Furiosa does not focus on the titular Mad Max for the first time in the franchise, meaning it is interesting to see how it compares to period time. That said, it is worth noting that the Max office numbers for Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior, and Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome are somewhat unclear due to their overall unpopularity, their older age, and the primary demographic being Australia rather than the United States. Mad Max domestic opening weekend null worldwide box office total $99 million, domestic box office total $8 million. Mad Max 2 The Road Warrior domestic opening weekend $2 million, worldwide box office total $23 million, and domestic box office total $23 million. Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome domestic opening weekend $7 million, worldwide box office total is $36 million, and domestic box office is also $36 million. Mad Max Fury Road opening is $45 million, worldwide box office is $369 million, domestic box office is $153 million. Furiosa A Mad Max Saga opening is $31 to $33 million, worldwide box office total is $172 million, domestic box office total is $67.4 million. Is Furiosa a box office bomb? To determine whether Furiosa is a box office bomb, it is best to look at what the film needs to earn to be labeled a success. Usually, it is often stated that tentpole Hollywood movies need to earn 2.5 times their production budget to begin turning a profit. This takes into account marketing and distribution cost, as well as any other outstanding fees and payments. While not a perfect metric, it is commonly used, and any film that earns beneath this threshold is usually classed as a Hollywood box office bomb. With a reported budget of $168 million, which does not account for marketing cost, Furiosa would have needed to make around $420 million to break even. Sadly, Furiosa was a significant box office bomb of 2024, though not as bad as Argyle or The Ministry of Manly Warfare, a disappointing result for a film that received strong reviews and revisited one of the most famous movie sagas of all time. There was also little in the way of extreme competition until A Quiet Place Day 1 and Horizon An American Saga Chapter 1 on June 28. In the month between Furiosa and these two films, only Bad Boys Ride or Die could be seen as competition that reduced Furiosa box office, with the other major film Insider 2 likely only impacting Garfield's success. Modern practice of VOD and digital sales make this prediction somewhat less accurate as a film success or lack thereof upon home release could dictate whether it is a failure or a triumph. Modern practice of VOD and digital sales make this prediction somehow less accurate as a film success or lack thereof upon home release could dictate whether it is a failure or a triumph. The movie's failure is symptomatic of wider Hollywood problems. Theatrical release are seemingly taking inspiration from one of Furiosa's many chapters titled by Becoming a Wasteland, with Furiosa a Mad Max Saga becoming the latest to join the club as unfortunately no one is witnessing is. What Furiosa's box office means for the Mad Max franchise future. The Mad Max universe is vast and could welcome several spin-offs, yet Furiosa's box office puts the franchise future at risk. Even though Furiosa leaves the door open for other stories to be told in this universe, whether a franchise continue or not usually comes down to the box office and nothing more. It must be noted that Fury Road performance during the award season and the cult status it acquired helped give the movie a second life of despite a not so impressive box office run, which could happen to Furiosa. Still, the Mad Max saga is now in a tough position. Perhaps future Mad Max movies will have to be made under smaller budget, echoing the saga's origins. George Miller has discussed his plans for future Mad Max movies, including a prequel and a sequel to Fury Road. In 2022, Miller commented on Mad Max The Wasteland, nothing is still not fully evolved. Although revisiting the part of Mad Max, particularly from Fury Road after Furiosa, sounds incredibly exciting, it has now become much more difficult for the sake to continue. Fury Road was not a box office hit, yet Furiosa, a Mad Max saga, grossed significantly less than its predecessor. Perhaps future Mad Max movies will have to be made under smaller budget, echoing the saga's origins. Furiosa still found success after its box office run. The only hope for the Mad Max franchise to continue is the success of Furiosa after it left the box office. After a shockingly bad box office run, the movie jumped to number 1 on both the iTunes and Fandango VOD charts for the week of June 20 to 30. Additionally, after releasing on Max, the movie went straight to number 1 on the top 10 movies list of the streamer. The success online may not be enough to continue the franchise, considering how dismally it performed in theater, but it shows that fans are passionate about Furiosa despite what the numbers says. Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga. Ridiculous Mad Max statistics makes Furiosa $173 million box office even more surprising. Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga is a pivotal installment in the Mad Max franchise, set shortly before the event of the extremely successful Fury Road in the Mad Max timeline and starring Fury Road's fan favorite character, Furiosa. The Furiosa was once expected to be another Mad Max franchise success. It drew criticism for its fake-looking special effects, and failed to perform financially. Despite largely positive reviews from fans and critics, Furiosa has perhaps unfairly been described as a flop, drawing just $173 million at the box office against its enormous and record-breaking budget, a situation that makes one Mad Max state seems even more shocking. Furiosa and George Miller's origin, 1979 Mad Max had some unexpected similarities. They both has revenge as a central theme. Furiosa's bleak ending is tonally similar to Mad Max, and both movies have a 90% Rotten Tomatoes score. However, the two movies differ drastically in terms of their box office success. Mad Max was originally a low-budget critical failure which grew into a record-breaking cult hit over time. Firoza's enormous budget was apprehending and its story was precise, which makes Firoza's box office failure even more surprising when compared to Mad Max's financial success. The origin Mad Max movie was made for only a fraction of Firoza's budget. Director George Miller was relatively unknown when he made the origin Mad Max movie, so he had to make his gritty dystopian revenge story on a teeny budget of just 40,000 Australian dollar, approximately $350,000. The low budget shaped the lore and future of the Mad Max and as Miller only said Mad Max in the future because it was cheaper to shoot an abandoned building. Furiosa was made on a $168 million budget, the largest budget ever spent on a Mad Max movie. Their resulting box office figures have made both movies into record breakers for very different reasons. Comparing its box office success with its low budget, Mad Max won a genuine world record for being the most profitable movie ever made at a time. Mad Max held this title for 20 years before being overtaken by the found footage horror The Blair Witch Project in 1999. Furiosa currently holds the record for the biggest budget ever used on an Australian movie. However, Furiosa also held a disappointing Mad Max Saga record, with the worst 2 weeks drop in the franchise history, as revenue dropped by 59% between week 1 and 2 after its release. This discrepancy only highlights the origin Mad Max extraordinary achievement. How the original Mad Max box office compares to Furiosa. Furiosa would have had to double its staggering budget to succeed financially, but Furiosa's $173 million box office earnings barely surpassed its budget. It is difficult to compare the older Mad Max movies to Furiosa, as the films were generally cult hits rather than immediate success. However, the box office figures for the original Mad Max movie and Furiosa clearly indicate their respective success and failure. Mad Max was an unprecedented financial and critical hit, and while Furiosa is undoubtedly a box office bomb, it was not a critical flop. Mad Max 1979 approximately budget $350,000, box office $100 million, and Rotten Tomato score are 94%. Mad Max The Road Warrior 1981 $3 million budget, $36 million box office, 94% Rotten Tomato score. Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome 1985 $10 million budget, $36 million box office, 79% Rotten Tomato score. Mad Max Fury Road $160 million budget, $380 million box office, 97% Rotten Tomato score. Furiosa A Mad Max Saga 2024 $168 million budget, $173 million box office, 90% Rotten Tomato score. Furiosa box office failure may not be connected to the movie itself. Furiosa was released over a 3-day memorial weekend during which cinema-going families would be unlikely to choose the R-rated Furiosa over the family-friendly Garfield, which was also released that weekend. Furiosa also runs for 148 minutes and might have been more successful had it been released in a colder month when watching a long movie indoor would be appealing. If these factors are taken into account with a different release plan, studio might still take a chance on a sequel to Furiosa despite its financial failure. Tonight, we dance to Darwin, the charming warlord Dementis, played by Chris Hemsworth, proclaims ahead of a brutal punishment. Motorbikes are mounted, they leave dust and blood in their wake. This is the wasteland, the post apocalyptic desert setting of George Miller's beloved Mad Max series. But Miller's latest film is the wasteland seen differently. Its inner working, politics, and structure of survivor filtered through the perspective of a young Furiosa. The tough as nail hero introduced in 2015 Mad Max Fury Road in Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga, the titular hero Anya Joy is our guide on a journey home, and with Miller's impeccable world building, sharp directorial eye, and smart casting, this masterpiece of a prequel makes us feel like we are riding right alongside her. Survival of the fittest is the law of the wasteland. No Mad Max movie has expresses it as poignantly as Furiosa. Through the capability and strength Miller gives the future Imperator, there's no denying she is both mentally and physically occupied for the worst of struggles. Both the confidence Taylor Joy projects and the way Miller chooses to frame his star with the focus on her strong, unflinching gaze, give us the sense that she is accompanied to the harsh ways of the new world, even if she longed for the old one she was ripped from. Building on Charlize Theron's quiet, contemplating turn as Furiosa in Fury Road, Taylor Joy burns as bright as the desert sun in a nearly wordless role. She disappears inside Furiosa and using the character's shield willpower, she builds a tragically building foundation that's hushed yet powerful. Firoza's quest to return to the lush oasis of the green place of many mothers is an epic, and it still feels that way even though we know from Fury Road that she will not reach her destination. Taylor's Joy Fire's cunning and completely gripping performance is up to that task. Hemsworth is also is fine from one moment he is saving us with his MCU bred magnetism, the next he is rappelling us with tremendous cruelty. The warlord who imprisons Furiosa is proof that Hemsworth should be playing more villains, especially those who allow him to revel in the many faces of evil. On the sporting side, Charlie Fraser is on fire as Firoza's mother, Mary Jabasa, taking no prisoners, literally and figuratively, in her fight to keep her daughter from harm. Fraser has nearly the same round test-like eyes as Taylor Joy, which not only connect their characters visually but also bolsters attachment to Mary. Tom Borg playing legendary war trick master Praetorian Jack matches Taylor-Joy's sense of silent dedication and crushing royalty with a performance that feels hardened but not hollow, the product of a life lived in chaos. Both films are tied together so seamlessly that the satisfaction of it just melt off the screen. Miller cake for world building is on full display and gorgeously photographed by the great Gatsby cinematographer Simon Dogan. He and the director band together to create vibrant and striking imagery that tells Frosa's story as well as the world is Miller and Nico Lothre's script. Demetrius becomes covered in red flare dust early on, seemingly signifying where his arc is headed. Later, a wig crafted by a young Furiosa becomes stuck on a tree branch during a death defying escape. Miller holds on the hairpiece as time accelerates around it and the branch grows and blossoms. One lingering shot puts all of the events of Furiosa in perspective alongside Fury Road, trying both films together so seamlessly that the fiction of it just melt off the screen. Junkie XL Rockling score performs a similar function with its callbacks to the theme of Fury Road, Furiosa elegantly building tankline linked to the other Mad Max films to give us the full scope of the wasteland and its inhabitants, offering satisfying answer to many burning questions along the way. If you are an avid fan, you will know which to anticipate. This is not a fast and furious movie. It's not all about one hoping what come before until it becomes a cartoon. That escape scene is one of the many thrilling section sequences that keeps this 2.5 hour movie running on all cylinders. The kind of excitement that helps Furiosa dodge the we all know where this is heated problem of other prequels. The outrageous stunts of Fury Road set a new standard for action filmmaking as well as sky-high expectation for any subsequent Mad Max movies. And while Furiosa doesn't outdo its predecessors wall-to-wall car chases, it's not necessarily trying to. This is not a Fast and Furious movie. It's not all about one hoping what comes before when it becomes a cartoon. Instead, its action is just as effective as Fury Roads when things ramp up. They bury the needle on the speedometer. What did we say about Mad Max Fury Road? One of the five chapters of the story is entirely dedicated to a rip-roaring fight on wheel that gives us a front-row view of Furiosa determination and focus. Taylor-Joy is utterly transfixing in this scene, and even knowing that her character will survive both the fight and the film, there's still a sense of peril as they cling to the undercarriage of a giant war rig. This chapter and much of the rest of Furiosa Desert lets you out of the chokehold until the driver hit the brakes. Later, when the rivalry between Dementus and his fellow warlord Immortan Joy escalates, Miller finds shocking new ways to depict the conflicts when they sequable. It's their many followers who do the fighting, again sidestepping the fact that we know Joy will live to see Fury Road. The practical staging and visual effects of a high-octane ambush in Dementis territory and a raid on Jews' turf work in tandem to create a bold, distinctly Mad Max spectacles. Car and truck savagely barrel down the blockades of a fortress structure crumble underneath running feet and gunshot whiz by at practically every moment. Miller is still moving as fast as ever and is accelerating to be in his passenger seat. Despite all its violence, the driving force of Furiosa is love. The biggest surprise up the director's sleeve, despite all its violence, the main quarter by reviving motorbike, the women tortured at the stake. The driving force of Furiosa is love. The protagonist yearning for her motherland, her unexpected connection with Praetorian Jack, even Dementis impulses to rule as he does, all spring from a vast emotional landscape. With that, Miller expertly shows us that when we fight for love, we must be prepared for the side effects and consequences. For Demences and American Joy, it's the third of power. For Furiosa, it's the shedding of who she knows herself to be. Toward the end, even we are all acquainted with all that below Furiosa, one character speaks of her with reverence. That is the darkest of angels, the fifth rider of the apocalypse. Thanks to this film, we now know how and why Furiosa was forced to become the show stealer we meet in Fury Road. The miracle here is that Miller and his team have packed in enough eye-popping daring to captivating acting and yes, heart to make the next step in her journey feel almost incidental. It helps that they have done so much to integrate Furiosa into the larger Mad Max saga, but this is a triumph with enough cut and gumption to stand entirely on its own. It's hard to overstate how impactfully crafted Furiosa, a Mad Max saga is, both as a prequel to Mad Max Fury Road and was a standalone story of how the wasteland created a powerful character. With a ferocious and savage heart, George Miller's film takes flight into epic status, weaving together top-notch world building and emotional resonant dictatorial eye, searing performance, sharp cinematography, and a hell-raising score. This is a remarkable hero's journey punctuated by incredible action scenes and an utterly stunning reflection on life and love prevailing beyond the fall of civilization. Maybe Hideo Kojima said it best: George Miller is my god, and the saga he tells is my Bible. Witness is. Furiosa, a Mad Max saga, is spinning its wheels at the global box office. It has not even played in theater for 3 full weeks yet, but Warner Bros. Furiosa, a Mad Max saga, already appears to be nearing the end of its disappointing run. The movie dropped out of the top 5 at the domestic box office this weekend, where it was overtaken not only by the family friendly If but also the holdover hit Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. But the writing was on the wall in the film's opening weekend itself when it debuted to worryingly low numbers after what seems like incredibly positive online buzz following its premiere at the Cannes Film Festival. Furiosa has grossed only $58 million domestically so far and another $85 million from overseas markets for a cumulative global haul of $144 million. It's easily one of the biggest underperformers of the year after Universal The Fall Guy, directed by George Miller. Furiosa grossed $26 million in its first weekend at the domestic box office and fell by a hefty 59% in weekend 2. In the third weekend, when most films find their footing, Furiosa had an even harsher fall, 61%, losing around 900 theaters. At this rate, the movie will wrap up its run with around $70 million domestically of its lucky. All this against a reported budget as high as around $170 million. And the situation is not much brighter overseas either. Even Miller's contemporaries in Australia did not show up to watch the film. The movie has grossed only a little over $2 million down under. It's a top grossing overseas market in South Korea, followed by the United Kingdom, Mexico, and France. This weekend, Frosa debuted in China, where it made a little over $3 million. By comparison, Mad Max Fury Road grossed over $150 million domestically and nearly $370 million worldwide in 2015, against a reported budget of around $160 million. The movie was not a smash hit but was critically acclaimed upon release. It won 6 Oscars from 10 nominations and is widely considered to be one of the greatest action movies of all time. Furiosa is one of the biggest underperformers of the year. Reviews for Furiosa have been positive as well. The movie appears to have settled at a 90% approval rating on the aggregator website Rotten Tomatoes, with critics noting its more epic narrative and lofty psychological ideas as compared to the first film, which was hailed for its achievements in action choreography. But audience simply were not interested in watching a prequel about the warrior Furiosa, who was played so memorably by Charlize Theron in Fury Road. Unlike that film, which was set over a couple of days, Furiosa takes place over a decade and features Alayla Brownie and Anya Taylor-Joy in the titular role, also starring Chris Hemsworth, Tom Borg, and Lucy Hulme. Furiosa is the first Mad Max movie to not feature the character at all. What are the origins of the Mad Max franchise? While Frosa's inability to, as Dr. Dementis would say, make it epic might have come as a surprise, the Mad Max franchise has never quite adhered to Hollywood norms and can trace its origin to the exploitation movement in Australia, starring a little-known Mel Gibson in the titular role. The creamy first film was released in 1979. It was a box office success, grossing $100 million globally and introducing the world to the Australian New Wave. A sequel, Mad Max 2, released as The Road Warrior in the US, followed in 1981 and also garnered widespread acclaim. The Road Warrior is often regarded as one of the greatest sequels of all time and grossed over $40 million globally. A third film, Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, opened to a relatively muted response in 1985. Co-directed by George Ogilvy, his remains the only time Miller surrenders the reign of the series to anybody else. The movie made over $35 million globally and serves as Gibson Valentine playing the characters. It is not shocking that Furiosa is struggling at the box office despite reviews. Furiosa and Garfield have combined to produce one of the worst Memorial Day weekend at the movies in ages, at least in terms of ticket sales. Those who have seen Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga, may be wringing their hands at a movie that good is doing so poorly, just a $25 million opening. But unfortunately, it was not exactly set up for success from the start. Why? A few reasons. At baseline, Mad Max Fury Road is not some extremely massive blockbuster superhit. The film earned $380 million worldwide on a $150 million budget and even more in marketing. Solid, but nothing too insane. Firoza, meanwhile, had an even higher budget at 168 million, but it's a big ask for not a sequel but a prequel follow up to our on its predecessor, particularly for one main reason. It's hard to pitch a Mad Max movie without Mad Max actually in it. Absolutely, Chris Hemsworth and Anara Taylor-Joy do a phenomenal job, but this is a prequel spin-off of a side character in Fury Road who is not even being played by the same actresses this time, Charlize Theron. That's a bit confusing for the public or at the very least not super appealing. You do, in fact, short of need to have a constant awareness of the events of the first film. Even though this is a prequel, lets it end on something of an anticlimax. This is actually so essential that the film gives you a full highlight reel of the first film at the end to reinforce the villain. All do get their just desserts, and Frosa emerges victorious in that film. Finally, as much as I would like to say otherwise, critic reviews simply don't matter that much in terms of overall box office, or at least they can only move the needle so far. Firoza has an exceptional 90% score from critics and also audience, while in a lot of ways that's only preaching to the already converted. It did not seem likely George Miller was going to mess this up, and clearly he did not. But the movie needs more than just Miller diehards. Miller had said he'd like to keep making Mad Max movies forever, and I hope he is able to. But Hollywood and general audience are not really in a place to reward this kind of commitment at this point, and I had fear that this kind of performance will hurt this chance of being able to do more. At least with the same studio, at least with the same budget, there's a really nothing else to be done except tell your friends to see the film if they have not. Or convince your children they went to see Furiosa instead of Garfield. Furiosa seems like it was not going to have a real shot to start with, and unfortunately, that seems like it's being proven correct as we speak. Box office Furiosa off to slow start with $10.2 million opening day. Garfield denies on $8.4 million. It's a bit of wasteland out there for theater this summer as Memorial Day weekend is closing out a very underwhelming May on a down note. Warner Bros. Furiosa A Mad Max Saga is projected to open well short of the industry barrier estimates for a $40 million plus bow over the 4-day window. The high budget action epic is practically neck and neck for first place over Sony's animated adaptation, the Garfield movie on domestic charts. The Fairball Mad Max prequel spotted it to $10.2 million from 3,804 locations across Friday and preview screening. It scores IMAX and other premium large format auditorium to bolsters its ticket sales to its another tough underperformance this summer. The film's 2015 predecessor Mad Max Fury Road got to 16 million in its opening day. That movie also put together an impressive award season's run and got canonized by action genre fans. Even so, Furiosa seems unable to spin much box office traction of the stellar reputation of its predecessors, much like character-based spin-off of recent years like Pixar's Lightyear and Disney's Solo, A Star Wars Story. Furiosa was not seen as a dominant box office force upon its debut either, but the film managed to leg out an impressive 3.38x multiplier of its $45 million domestic opening weekend. It finished with 153 million in North America and 369 million worldwide. The dream for the R-rated epic Furiosa would be to long haul it like that, especially since it carries a $168 million production budget before marketing and distribution spend. Reviews has been stellar though not quite as superlative as the North Fury Road got. Early audience like it about the same, with audience survey from Cinema Score turning in a matching B plus grade. The buzz is solid, but the average film staying power in theater generally is not what it was 10 years ago, and this is a tough debit to swallow for exhibitors who usually get a boost to their business on Memorial Day weekend. Sans COVID lockdown periods, the opening over the past 6 years have included Top Gun Maverick, The Little Mermaid, Aladdin, and the aforementioned Solo, all of which crossed more than $100 million over the 4-day frame. No title this week will even sniff half of that, trading the compact momentum of Fury Road for a sweeping decades spanning revenge epic. Furiosa sees Anya Taylor-Joy playing the heroine, originated by Charlize Theron, as the warrior seeks revenge against the demented Dementors for slaying her mother and selling her into slavery. Series mastermind George Miller returns to direct. Meanwhile, Garfield may usually hate Mondays, but he will gladly create some extra ticket sales through the Memorial Day holiday. The animated film earned $8.4 million across Friday and Thursday previews from 4,035 locations. Furiosa has most of the premier large format real estate, but Garfield, which was financed by Alcon and animated by DNIG, has some showtime to boost its revenue. The Garfield movie is looking at an opening north of 31 million over the 4-day frame, giving it a good shot at beating Furiosa for the top slot on domestic charts. It's a respectable result for the animated production, which comes with a $60 million production price tag. The film has already opened in several international territories and earned more than $50 million. Critics did not like Garfield. Audiences are much more positive with a B+ grade on cinema score. Those still are not the crowd-pleasing ravages that family-friendly fare can grant. Chris Pratt was the Sunday Funny's most iconic villain in the animated feature, which sees Garfield ditch munching Lesna and lazing about for an adventure with the long-lost father. Mark Diddle directs. Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga movie ending explain. Furiosa Mad Max Saga ending does Anya Taylor-Joy defeat Dementis and makes it epic. George Miller returned to the Mad Max franchise once again with Furiosa A Mad Max Saga. The focus shifts from the franchise's long-time Bronic hero Max Sky and now center on Furiosa Anya Taylor-Joy, the Imperator of Immortal Joy, and the Warwick River from Mad Max Fury Road. Furiosa depicts the eponymous character's origin and backstory hinted at by the previous installment. The Odyssey-like tale illustrates how Furiosa was taken from her home and separated from her family at a young age. Imprisoned by the wasteland and its barbarous gangs and warlord, Furiosa seeks to keep a promise to her late mother to return to her precious homeland, the Green Place, at any cost. But how does the movie end? It's time to unpack the ending of Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga. The movie was released on May 20, 2024. Runtime is 148 minutes. Directed by George Miller. Writer is George Miller and Nick Lothris. And the movie is sequel to The Fury Road. Furiosa becomes a battle-hardened warrior to survive the wasteland. Furiosa is kidnapped from her home, the Green Place, by marauders who work for the charismatic barbaric warlord Dementis, Chris Hemsworth. While Furiosa's mother attempts to rescue her daughter, she is unsuccessful, stung up on a tree and tortured to death in front of her daughter to keep the hidden secrets of the Green Place. Later, Furiosa is traded to the captivity of Immortan Joy to be raised to become one of Joy's breeding wives at his citadel. In exchange, Demetrius is granted dominion over Gastown. After escaping the clutches of Rictus Erectus, she hides with the machines of Immortan Joy's citadels, pretending to be mute and concealing her gender. Eventually, she and the other mechanics construct the formidable war rig. During a cargo run across the free road, Furiosa's escape attempt is thwarted by a riding party on the war rig by the Octobos. Thanks to Furiosa's help, skilled driver Patratorian Jack managed to survive the raid. Seeing her potential, Jack takes Furiosa under his wing to make her part of his new road crew for the war rig and teach her how to survive the wasteland. Jack and Furiosa form a close bond and genuinely care for one another. Jack does attempt to help Furiosa escape and find her way home. Unfortunately, the escape is interrupted when Demetrius gains control of the bullet farm and declares a wasteland war against Immortan Joy, leading to the final act. Furiosa takes her sweet revenge against Demetrius. After Demetrius takes over the bullet farm, Furiosa and Jack are forced to flee from Demetrius' raiders. Furiosa's arm, where she tattooed a map back to her homeland, is grievously wounded, while Jack is slowly tortured to death by Demetrius' marauders. Furiosa cuts off her arm to escape, barely turning to the citadel. Furiosa warns Immortan Joy and his journals that Demetrius is attempting to draw him out to gain control of the citadel. Now Furiosa is out for revenge and looks to bring and to Demetrius for all the treachery he has brought upon her. Some weeks later, Furiosa acquires the gas-powered bionic arm she used in the previous film and goes on the hunt for Demetrius, who managed to escape a battle with some members of his crew. Furiosa steals a vehicle belonging to one of Joy's sons, stalking Demetrius across the wasteland. She systematically takes out the main member of his biker crew, tracking Demetrius through a brutal sandstorm. Sometime later, Demetrius awakens from his sleep, realizing that his weapons are gone and his bike is sabotaged. Nowhere left to run, Demetrius surrenders to Furiosa, who snaggles him and asks Demetrius if he remembers killing her mother. Furiosa unleashes her anger on Demetrius, demanding that he return her childhood and mother to her. Demetrius eventually recognizes Furiosa as the young girl whose mother he had killed. He attempts to persuade Furiosa into believing that they are the same, the already dead, and that can only feel alive from the sensation of committing horrendous act. The fate of Demetrius is left somewhere ambiguous as the film depicts multiple alternative versions of his fate. However, the history man who serves as the narrator of the story reveals that was told to his fish hand by Furiosa as the true fate of Demetrius. Furiosa shoots out Demetrius' vocal cords and uses his still living body, a human soul, to plant a peach tree given to Furiosa by her mother in the gardens of Immortan Joy's citadel. For an unknown amount of time, Demetrius survives in the soil of the new peach tree, and Furiosa picks the first ripened peach fruit over Demetrius' living, emaciated body. Furiosa ends at Mad Max Fury Road begin. An epilogue for the film depicts Furiosa secretly helping Immortan Joy's wives escape their captivity in the citadel and hiding them in the new war rig. Furiosa brings them the ripened peach fruit she picked from the tree planted over Demetrius' body, symbolizing hope for the future. After becoming Imperator Furiosa, she is now ready to leave the citadel with the wives and find her way home. The film ends mere minute before Mad Max Fury Road begins. Of course, Fury Road reveals the tragic fate of Furiosa's homeland and the remaining survivors who once lived there. The closing credit sequence is interpiced with the footage of Fury Road connecting the two films. Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga, act as a strong companion piece to Fury Road, expanding and fleshing out the world of the Mad Max franchise. Moviegoers who enjoy the previous film will enjoy a more extensive look at places that were only briefly glimpsed beforehand. Anya Joy proves to be a formidable replacement for Furiosa, taking over the role from Charlize Theron. The prequel acts as a powerful odyssey, depicting how Furiosa became the grim, hardened warrior who captivated audience in Fury Road. Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga, has finally hit theater, and if you are here and have moved on past this spoiler, we assume that you have already gotten your dose of the wasteland. If not, well, you were warned. This Fury Road prequel has a pretty cut and dry ending, largely because it takes us directly into one of the most universally beloved films of the last 20 years, Mad Max Fury Road. The final scene before the credit roll takes place maybe only hours before we meet Furiosa at the beginning of the 2015 installment of the franchise. As she smuggles Immortan Joy's harm into her war rig, still Furiosa does get a few moments to herself before she gathers the vibes into the belly of her death-dealing Simi and attempt to race their way to freedom. As Anya Taylor-Joy, Furiosa, and Chris Hemsworth demand to see their grudge match crescendo, their confrontation leads to an ending that's almost entirely up to the viewer to interpret. A narrator who we believe is George Chavatos, history man, but not quite as described the matters with which Furiosa is rumored to have dispatched to Mendes while the different scenarios played out on screen. A single bullet roasting on a makeshift craft and being dragged behind a wasteland hot rod. The point it's a story that's an upcoming legend being passed down through the ages. What ages? We are not sure because one time passed between the end of Furiosa and Fury Road. Still, this is an idea that George Miller has very explicitly toyed with. Sinker Max Rockant Sky V8 interpreter first sought revenge in the wasteland. Speaking to agents, Scott Corolla Miller had this to say about the revenge date. There is a kind of cultural evolution, Miller starts, where stories are told over and over again, but somehow they have to have some sort of resonance with their time. And we have been telling revenge stories in all cultures, specifically with Greek mythologies and mainly biblical stories, particularly Old Testament. It's a big in that word in all mythology, so how do you tell a variation of it? Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga is one of the biggest box office surprise in recent memory. And after 10 days of release, there appears to be little hope left for Warner Bros. Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga, the epic action film, dropped from number 1 last weekend to number 3 this time around at the domestic box office while continuing to struggle in overseas markets as well. Directed by George Miller, the movie infamously delivered the lowest Memorial Day holiday debut in nearly 3 decades and dropped by nearly 60% in weekend 2. Produced on a reported budget of nearly $168 million, Furiosa has grossed $49 million domestically and another $64 million from overseas markets, for a cumulative global haul of $114 million. It is a disheartening result for a movie that had seemingly built intense anticipation over the last few years. The movie it had also been deemed worthy of a high budget, which is initially appears to justify with stellar reviews. Furiosa currently hold a 90% fresh approval rating on the aggregator website Rotten Tomatoes. Incidentally, the film's audience rating is equally strong, meaning that those who watched it enjoyed it. Furiosa serves as a prequel to Miller's 2015 masterpiece Mad Max Fury Road, which opened to $45 million domestically, on its way to a lifetime stateside haul of just over $150 million. Fururope topped out globally with around $370 million, which was not exactly seen as ideal considering its reported budget of around $180 million. But it was a massive critical success, earning 10 Academy Award nominations and being widely hailed as one of the greatest action movies of all time. It introduced audience to the character Furiosa, played memorably by Charlize Theron. The prequel features Anya Taylor-Joy as the tragic warrior who is apprehended by the villainous Dr. Dementis and sold off to the technical warlord Immortan Joy. She goes on an epic revenge mission in the film, which is divided into 5 chapters and spans several years. Fury Road made more in its global opening than Furiosa has in 10 days. The series began in 1979 with the Grammy explosion film Mad Max, starring Mel Gibson in the titular role. Two sequels, Mad Max 2 The Road Warrior and Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, followed in 1981 and 1985. Fury Road serves as a franchise reboot with Tom Hardy stepping into the titular role, but the movie was marred by a turbulent production that reportedly caused anxiety between the two stars. The Mad Max series has grossed a combined total of over $600 million worldwide, also featuring Alela Browning as the young Furiosa and Tom Borg as Praetorian Jack. Furiosa is currently playing in the theaters. Furiosa, the dramatic ending explained. Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga is a thrilling revenge tale set over 15 years that finds Furiosa plucked from her family in Green Place as a child by the egotistical Dementis and his gang. Growing up in the wasteland, eventually under the role of immortal joy, Furiosa's lifeline quest is to find her way home and kill Dementus, the man who filled her life with chaos. And the ending features a dramatic showdown between Furiosa and Dementis in the middle of the wasteland. At the conclusion of the movie, Furiosa teams with Immortan Joy to successfully end Dementis' reign at the gas town outpost, which is known as the 40-Day War, that lead to Furiosa's high-speed bike race through the wasteland to track down a fleeing Dementis. The Warlord and his goons split up in different directions to distract Furiosa. The villain rides off into the wasteland in the middle of a sandstorm, thinking he has escaped her rage, letting his ego get the better of him. But Demetrius later wakes up in his makeshift shelter to find that Furiosa has emptied his water flask and stolen the front wheel of his bike. She stranded him in the middle of nowhere, similar to the way he captured Furiosa's mother, Mary to Basa, in the opening sequence. Furiosa beats him into submission and freakishly demands that he give her back the memory of her mother because the warrior is haunted by the way Demetrius gratified her. Unfortunately, he cannot recall Basa's death because of how many people he has killed over the years. By this point, the Machaoite villain has accepted his inevitable fate, but the taunts Furiosa, questioning whether she has it in her to make his death epic. The fate of Dementis is a shocking one. The demise of Dementis in the final scene of the movie is quintessential George Miller as it mixes violence with a poetic sense of irony. In a voiceover from the History Man, he explained that most believe Furiosa cut out Dementis' tongue and then shoot him in the head to kill him. However, as the year passed, other stories began to spread. One was that he chained Dementis to the back of her car and dragged him for days before killing him, similar to how Demetrius killed the original war-rig driver Praetorian Jack. Another is that she strung up Demetrius on a stake and tortured him as he did to Furiosa's mother. But the history man then revealed Demetrius' true fate told to him straight from Furiosa's lips. High above the citadel outpost, Demetrius spent the rest of his days lying in a room where a peach tree grew from his body.